All right. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to our webinar here. This is the 2025-2026 AMA Statewide Policy Agenda webinar. I'm really happy to be here. Really thrilled that we have so much interest in our statewide policy agenda, and that we're going to have a really robust discussion tonight. I'm appreciative of the representatives for being here. We have, people are still starting to come in, or, closing in on 50 attendees. I just want to say a few housekeeping things before we get started. The chat has been disabled. So, if you have a question, just put it in, use the Q&A function. We will have a Q&A at the end of the session. We'll have about 15 minutes for that, but we're going to get started, in just a minute here. We're I think we're just gonna get started because we have a really strong agenda, really tight agenda. And I just want to make sure we have enough time to get through it. So I'm going to share my screen and we'll kind of go over the run of show so we all know where we're headed tonight, what the schedule's going to be, and then we can get started. Okay, so we're doing it. This is the welcome. Welcome, everybody. Welcome to the agenda. Get excited. We're going to start off. I'm going to pass it over to our executive director, Jesse Kanson-Beninoff, who's going to give us a little bit of opening remarks, kind of set the context for this session, for where we are in Massachusetts. Then I'm going to pass it over to our legislators, our primary sponsors. So we're fortunate enough to be joined here by Rep. Vargas, by Rep. Cruz. We're expecting Rep. Kilcoyne to join shortly. But we're going to start it off with Rep. Vargas, who's going to say a few words. Then if Rep. Kilcoyne is joined by that time, we'll go to her. If not, Rep. Cruz will go to you. And then hopefully by that time, Rep. Kilcoyne will have joined. After that, I'm going to kind of get into the nitty-gritty of our policy agenda here. We're going to go through our top priorities and then get into our additional priorities to get a full sense of our policy agenda this year. Going to talk a little bit about our legislative strategy. We have a really ambitious agenda. I want to talk about how we're going to get that passed. And then, like I said, we're going to have time for a Q&A before closing for the night. Think we can get through that in an hour? So let's get started. Jesse, I'll pass it to you.
Thanks, Mike. Appreciate everyone joining us tonight. I want to say thank you to Representatives Vargas, Representative Cruz, and Rep. Kilcoyne, who will be joining us. It's really exciting to be working again with Rep. Vargas, who's been close ally of ours for the last couple sessions. Really been a great relationship, and then to be building a relationship with Representative Cruz, Representative Kilcoyne, and our Senate sponsors as well. I think if folks are on this call, they know the situation we face in Massachusetts. We do have an extreme shortage of homes across the Commonwealth. The administration just put out a number a couple months ago highlighting that we are needing to build over 222,000 homes here across the Commonwealth in the next 10 years. And we're falling short of that. We're falling short of that really in every region of the state, from the Cape through Boston, Greater Boston, up on the North Shore, over to Central Mass, even out in the Berkshires and Western Mass. So we have a lot of work cut out for us. We've made some important strides as a Commonwealth over the last couple sessions. Certainly, we've at Abundant Housing Massachusetts spent a lot of time working on implementation of the MBTA Communities Act, which we think is really important to unlock the potential to build more multifamily housing near transit and other locations in communities that have never really had, in many cases, any zoning for multifamily housing by right. So that's really important, but the production that we expect to come from the MBTA Communities Act won't get us to 222,000 homes alone. We also, as Abundant Housing Massachusetts, working closely with Rep. Vargas and his colleagues, as well as with our friends in the Senate last session, really focused on the Affordable Homes Act and implementing and getting a strong statewide by right ADU legalization passed. We're really proud of that. We think it's one of the strongest ADU laws, certainly in New England, probably one of the strongest up and down the eastern seaboard of the United States. But the projections there, 8 to 10,000 homes over the next 5 years, really important. And that's going to add a lot to our ability to build the homes we need. But also that alone won't do it. So we need to continue making strides. Really think it's important that we continue to think about the interplay between what the state allows communities to do in terms of zoning and how communities use zoning to create more opportunity for their residents, their teachers, their firefighters, the folks who serve us coffee at the coffee shops, who take care of our children, to make sure that they have an opportunity to live in the community of their choice, and that we all have that opportunity. That's why I'm really excited about our agenda, which is not just focused on zoning reform, also thinking about building code reform with single stair buildings, and also how do we maximize the potential for ADUs with our ADU trust fund bill. So I know Mike and the representatives are going to get more into that. Want to again thank our representatives, partners here, Rep Vargas, Rep Cruz, and Rep Kilcoyne, who's joined us. Really grateful for the partnership. I'm really excited for the work that we're going to do over this next session on our 3 priority bills, and then the rest of our legislative agenda supporting some of our partners and their priorities as well. So I'm going to hand it back to Mike, I believe, or I think we'll hand it over to the reps, but just wanted to say thanks again to everyone for being here, and look forward to working with you over the next, what are we at, 15 months left, something like that? Lost track at this point. Thank you all.
Just getting started, Jesse. Just getting started. So thank you for those words. Like I said, we're gonna pass it over to Rep Vargas now to introduce himself in case some of the folks on the call don't really know, and talk a little bit about why he's decided to champion this issue. He's been such a fantastic partner for us for years now, and yeah, happy to do it again. So Rep Vargas, floor is yours.
Thank you, Mike, and thank you to my colleagues who are on the call here tonight, Rep. Kilcoyne, Rep. Cruz. It's really an honor to be working together on housing legislation and to be here with 2 legislators who are in the weeds on legislation and legislators who are really workhorses. So it's always a pleasure and a privilege to be on with them as well. And thank you to Abundant Housing for another session where we get to partner together. I think we've got a pretty good track record so far through MBTA communities, through the ADU legislation. And hopefully, these pieces of an act to promote Yes in My Backyard that we can move forward. For the folks that I haven't met that are on the Zoom, it's great to see the about 60 plus people that we have on here on a Thursday night. The day after Liberation Day, quote unquote, where tariffs have been implemented, which are going to make cost of living even higher in the Commonwealth and across the country. This legislation and housing legislation has never been more important. It just got that much more difficult and that much more expensive to build housing. And so the work that we've done, if we knew it was important, if we knew we were in crisis before, it just got that much more important now with these tariffs. So for the folks that I haven't met, my name is Andy Vargas. I serve the city of Haverhill. I represent the city of Haverhill in the legislature. I have since 2017 when I came in a special election. Before that, I served on the city council, so I had some fun dealing with local zoning issues and trying to get developments through to build more housing in Haverhill. Housing has always been key to my story and to my policy agenda because I wouldn't be here today without housing. I was actually born in Cambridge. My parents are from the Dominican Republic. But when housing got too expensive in Cambridge, I was 6 years old and we had to move an hour north to Haverhill. And in retrospect, it was the best decision they could ever make. No offense to my colleagues from Cambridge or the people who live in Cambridge. But the whole reason I was able to have a stable upbringing was because they found an affordable home that they could eventually buy in Haverhill. And as I grew up, I started to see the difference it made in the lives of my colleagues, my friends, my peers that didn't have a stable home that they could live in, that couldn't afford a home that they could live in. That housing was the greatest stressor in their household. And so I know that if we care about the multitude of issues that we're faced with as a society and as a Commonwealth, there are fewer things that are closer to a single bullet issue than housing. If we're able to make housing more affordable, people can afford other aspects of their lives. They can focus on the things that are most important to them, their education, their health care, their nutrition. It's the biggest bill that folks face on a monthly basis. And so we've got to figure this thing out because it's key to figuring everything else out in our society. And so that's why I'm thrilled to file an act to promote Yes in My Backyard. Again, this session is sort of the 2.0 version because we did get pieces of the first version, which included the ADU legislation in the Affordable Homes Act. This bill goes a little bit further than the original version, and rightly so. And we're excited to do that. It does a couple of things. It allows 5 homes by right on all lots served by water and sewer, and 3 homes by right on all other lots. It eliminates minimum parking requirements for new residential developments. It creates a new process by which a property owner can subdivide their lot into smaller lots, which can only be used for new housing. It also requires executive agencies to submit a report identifying grayfield sites suitable for redevelopment. And it prioritizes, again, the disposition of state-owned land for affordable housing. We want to make sure that we've got all this land that's available at the state, that we actually start to expedite the processing and get those RFPs out so that we can build more affordable housing. We're also clarifying in this legislation that ADUs can be built on the same lot as multifamily housing. And we're allowing the legislature to adopt the housing production plan developed by Governor Healy's Housing Advisory Council as well. So those are some of the highlights in our bill and act to promote Yes in My Backyard. We also have another bill, the YIGBY bill, a Yes in God's Backyard, which we're very excited about as well, that focuses on ensuring that religious institutions that own land have the right to develop affordable housing as well by right. And so we're excited about that, and I'm looking forward to hearing who's going to be against God in that situation because, good luck. You can't be against God in housing. But more than excited to continue to partner with Abundant Housing. And if you're on this call and you're a member, thank you for being a member of Abundant Housing. If you're not a member, you'll consider being a member. Nothing big gets done without coalitions, and this is one of the most effective and well-organized and thoughtful coalitions that work with us here at the State House. So I've talked long enough, and you're going to hear from much more eloquent legislators than myself following me. Happy to be lead off here and looking forward to another successful session together.
Great. Well, really appreciate that. And I like how you kind of started sharing your housing story. I mean, I wish we had time to go through everybody to share their housing story because I'm sure there's a reason they come to this work and there's a reason they prioritize that. And it often comes back to where they grew up, where they came from. So I'm glad that you were able to share that. Rep. Kilcoyne, I'm going to hand it over to you next to talk a little bit about, introduce yourself and share why you decided to champion this bill.
Thank you so much, Mike. I'm so happy to be here with all of you today, including my colleagues, Rep. Vargas and Rep. Cruz. And I'm excited to partner with Abundant Housing on the incredible work that they do. Last session, I had the honor of serving as vice chair of the Housing Committee, and I got to work with the committee as well as all of my colleagues in passing a huge Affordable Homes Act piece. But while that is an incredible accomplishment and one that was much needed, clearly the work is not done. And so just to give a little information about myself as well, my name is Mike Kilcoyne, for those that don't know me, and I represent the 12th Worcester District. That consists of 6 communities just north of Worcester and just south of Fitchburg and Leominster. Clinton, where I live, is the biggest community with about 15,000, all crammed in within about 5 square miles. And then I also represent the surrounding communities of Berlin, Boylston, Sterling, Lancaster, and a piece of Northborough. And all of those communities tend to be much more suburban, or in fact, even rural in nature, where you have a lot less densely populated, much more family homes. And I think my district really does embody some of the challenges that we're seeing across the state. Clinton was a place where you lived and you could essentially walk to work. It's one of those traditional factory communities that used to have most of the people employed by manufacturing. That has shifted a little bit, but what we're seeing happening now is Clinton, where there used to be an abundant, really, of affordable housing and options for people to live, people are being priced out of. And I think that one thing that I'm so excited about to partner with Abundant Housing on this bill, and I hope all of you support as well, is an act to study single staircase residential buildings. And so one of the ways and one of the, I think, strategies that could be effective is when you take a big issue, such as the housing crisis, that seems monumental. When you break it down into smaller pieces, you can really achieve real change in a way that really impacts people's lives and really starts to chip away at the crisis and really move us forward into that area. And I think this bill will really play an important role in really making a difference in a lot of communities, not just in the communities that I represent, but across the state. I mentioned Clinton earlier, where this is a community that has a lot of multifamily housing. But a challenge I've seen, and I think a challenge that exists across the state, is we have a lot of vacant housing that could be brought online, if not for the fact that in order to make sure if you have anything above 4 stories, you must have 2 staircase access to get out of the building. And so what that means is this rule that's been in place for many years that originally was in there due to fire concerns and fire safety, means that in order to have anything above, a 3 to 4 multifamily home, a lot of these like triple deckers or maybe, 4-story homes, you have to be able to have 2 staircases in them, 2 access points. And what we feel with this bill is that there's an opportunity to really look at this issue, and really see if we really need this to keep people safe, or if there's a way we can allow for more of these homes to be brought online if we only allow 1 single staircase. I know in my district, we have so many houses and buildings that have maybe are 3 stories, maybe 4 stories, that have 2 apartments or 2 homes there and have a third, but the owner cannot afford to make the improvements to create that additional staircase. And therefore it's just sitting there and no one can use it. I'm in the process of hunting for a home myself. And so I spent the weekend attending some open houses locally, and I went to one that was a 3-family home. So had 3 units in it, that hasn't been touched since probably the 1960s. Like literally, it was like walking into a time capsule. And there's a lot of those homes that are in Clinton and all over the place, and they need a lot of work. But it's a building that if the work is done, if there's a willingness to do it, you're going to see 3 more units online that can house individuals and families. And if we can study this issue, if we can kind of make this little tweak to make it a little bit more accessible for folks, I think that we could bring online lot of housing that can make a real big difference in many of these communities. And I think the beauty of this bill is that it does recognize the concerns of the original law that were there. We're not looking to change this immediately. We're looking to create a commission to bring in stakeholders, both from the housing world and the public safety world, to make sure that whatever comes out of it, the recommendations are going to be in line with making sure that we're not creating a situation that puts people in any sort of unsafe situation, but also recognizing the desperate need we have for more housing. We've seen other states do this, and I think we have strong data to indicate that this would not be a significant fire hazard, but we certainly want to respect the voices in the fire safety community as well. And I think that this is a simple bill that we can use as an example, a tool that seemingly seems like a minor change, a minor bill, but really can make a huge impact. Representative Vargas talked about the importance of ADUs and its inclusion in the Affordable Homes Act. That's another example that was like a small piece of the puzzle that we're hoping is going to quickly bring online housing. When I was working with Chair Arciero, I think he talked about the housing crisis that we're in right now in these terms of we have to look long-term and short-term. We know we need to make the investments to build a lot more housing, to make sure that people have a place to stay, that they can afford to stay, that they're not being forced priced out of their communities or even forced out of the state. But we have to consider the short-term opportunities as well. And this is an example, I think, of a bill that if we're able to get it done, we can pretty quickly, relatively quickly, immediately create opportunities for investing in existing structures to create more housing. I'm super excited to also shout out to my Senate, the Senate sponsor as well, Senator John Cronin. He and I actually share Clinton together. And if any of you have the pleasure of knowing Clinton or coming to it, or if you haven't, I encourage you to visit. It's a wonderful place. You can see what I mean. It's incredibly densely populated, a lot of multi-housing, but Senator Cronin also represents Fitchburg and Leominster, two similar communities where a lot of that multifamily housing stock exists. We don't have skyrise properties. It's not zoned for that, but we are zoned for multifamily. So if we can get this done, I think it can make a real difference. And I'm so excited to see so many enthusiastic supporters of more abundant housing on this Zoom. I'm so excited to virtually meet all of you. And I look forward to working with you as we move forward in the legislative session. And I don't want to I have a tendency to ramble on and start to repeat myself, and I can feel myself getting there then. And I know we have a lot of important issues to discuss. So I'm going to turn it back over to Mike, and I believe Representative Cruz still has to speak, but thank you all for listening. And like I said, excited to get to work and partner with all of you on trying to make the Commonwealth a better place to live for everybody.
Really appreciate that. And I think the point about breaking a huge problem down to smaller achievable goals is really important. And if you look at all of our bills here, they're all kind of smaller things here, but if taken together, it would be a really meaningful step to creating thousands of new homes for Massachusetts residents. So appreciate you bringing that point there. Yeah, without further ado, last but not least, Rep. Cruz, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you so much, Mike, and to the Abundant Homes Coalition for having me and for being great partners. So honored to be in this space here today with my dear colleagues, Chair Vargas, Vice Chair Kilcoyne, two dear friends, and certainly folks that I view as lions in the house when it comes to tackling the work that is necessary to improve the lives of our residents. So just incredibly humbled that I get to share the stage with them, and certainly grateful for their leadership on the two issues that you all just heard about. So I'm here today to talk a little bit about a piece of legislation that I filed alongside my dear colleagues, State Representative Orlando Ramos and State Senator Sal DiDomenico, around establishing an accessory dwelling unit trust fund. But before I do that, just briefly to introduce myself, my name is Manny Cruz. I proudly serve as the first Afro-Indigenous state representative for the great city of Salem. And my hometown is my beloved hometown, but my family hails from the Dominican Republic and Puerto Rico. And as I think about my ancestral story and how my ancestors got to this country, and then my experience as a young person growing up in the Commonwealth, I recognize that my story is very similar to those that live in my district. Salem has always been a place that has welcomed immigrant communities, that has welcomed new arrivals, and as a gateway city, certainly has always been a city of two different tales. Those who ventured out to the Far East and were leaders in industry and had tremendous wealth and built these fine Victorian homes in McIntyre Homes on Chestnut Street. And then there were those that couldn't afford a home, and they were working day by day to try to keep stable housing. And that story continues to this very day. And in Salem, we've done our part. But as I think about my own lived experience as a young person growing up in the North Shore, I grew up transient, raised by a single mom who was escaping domestic violence. We moved from place to place, and finding a home was incredibly difficult for us because of our circumstances in the home. And where I am now, I'm one of those young people who was lucky enough to be able to buy a home, become a homeowner. But the journey in between is really the story of what we have to solve here. And that means that we need every tool that is in the toolbox. And so whether we're talking about swinging for the fences with the Affordable Home Act, the MBTA Communities Act, Yes in My Backyard, tackling exclusionary zoning, and all of the smaller wins that we can accumulate along the way, we can really start to paint a coherent picture that tackles both the urgency, but also a vision for what it means to truly provide every resident of the Commonwealth an opportunity to be able to have a home that is both safe, healthy, and that is their own. So as I think about the work that we've done as a community in Salem, we're often cited as a an exemplar for the state. We've been a community that recognizes our responsibility to housing, and it doesn't mean that there haven't been fights along the way. Our lieutenant governor, when she was mayor, it seemed like almost every 2 years there was a new fight to try to update our zoning laws. We were a community in Salem that passed ordinances to modernize access to ADUs in our community. We harnessed the power of HDIP, Commonwealth Builders, to bring in new developments. And we've redeveloped and tried to dignify things like our housing authority. So when I think about all the things that we've done in Salem and the way that we're viewed reputationally, I like to give myself a pat on the back, but I'm also soberly reminded that we're not doing enough. That we are a community that saw over the last 3 years several hundred students that are now identified as homeless in our district, that don't have a place to go, that are sleeping in cars and still trying through Herculean efforts to make their way to school. And their families are looking for the dignity of having a roof over their head. To quote my mayor, if we were to look at Salem, there are 1.1 new housing permits that are issued for every 1,000 residents. And so if Salem was a state, we'd be ranked 49th in the nation. So right at the bottom. So I say this to remind ourselves that there is an urgency to do this work and to do it now, and to look at all these different solutions. And what my piece of the puzzle is here today is around establishing an accessory dwelling unit trust fund that would allow for lower to moderate income households who do own a home to be able to access new financial resources in the form of grants, financial assistance, credits, loan products that would be aimed at tackling all of the different steps that are required to be able to build an accessory dwelling unit. And as we know, as for new homeowners like myself, the access to capital remains a large challenge. So I like to think of this in characters. So my vision is that one of my mentees, who's 10 years behind me, who's probably going to access the Affordable Homes Act's Mass Dreams program, going to buy their first house, single family, start on the road of building economic prosperity, and then down the line recognizes they want to build an accessory dwelling unit for that additional income, or perhaps they want to do right by their neighbors and create that naturally affordable housing so that their friends don't have to move outside of this state. So as I think about the establishment of a trust fund and what it will do, it will ensure that all the work that we have done as a Commonwealth to expand the use of ADUs, that we're also providing resources and doing it in an equitable manner that will allow for them to actually be created by those that are the most committed to our communities, those are from working class backgrounds, middle class backgrounds, who want to start their families here in the Commonwealth. And this would be another way that we can continue to retain them here in the Commonwealth and build housing for those that need it. So I say for my part that I feel the call every day. Housing is the number one issue in my office, where I have residents calling frequently in need of housing, and they want to stay in Salem, in our Commonwealth. But the reality is that we are falling short of the promise. And so what the Abundance Coalition provides for us is the opportunity to really put forth to the legislature and the rest of my colleagues the opportunities that exist to truly solve this problem, both in the short term, but then also in the long term. So I thank all of you for being a part of this coalition. We cannot do this work alone. In Beacon Hill, it requires consensus. So my ask is that today you heard about these three bills. You're going to learn a little bit more about them and the agenda. Please talk to your legislators, to your state senator, to your state representative, but also go back into your local community and do what you can to persuade your local officials to also get behind our bills. I'm really excited about this panel today because we have legislators from each corner of the Commonwealth represented, and that is the type of coalition building that we need to do year round, is to have a statewide coalition that engages all of our residents so that no one is left behind as we create policy solutions to meet their needs. So I thank you all for being here today, and I look forward to working with you in the session ahead.
Yeah, well, thank you, Rep. Cruz. Really, really appreciate the remarks. And of course, yeah, excited about our panel for a lot of reasons, not least of which we have some good geographic diversity there. So we're going to head into the next session here. I want to thank the representatives for their time. You know, if they want to stick around and listen to the rest of the webinar, that's great. But of course, you understand busy schedules. If you need to get going, that is fine too. But again, just want to reiterate, really appreciate the time that you took to share and meet our members. Okay, so I'm going to reshare my screen here, and we're going to talk a little bit more about the policy agenda. So as I alluded to earlier, we have kind of two tiers to our policy agenda. We have our top priorities, which are the bills that we took a lead on drafting, the ones that you've already heard a little bit about today, and that we're going to be dedicating a lot of our resources towards advancing. But then we also have kind of a second tier of additional policy priorities that are broken into three subsections here: building more homes, supporting renters, and investing in affordable housing. I'm going to start by kind of going through our top priorities, then I'll talk a little bit about our additional priorities. And I think the purpose of having these kind of two levels there is that, of course, we are abundant housing Massachusetts, and so our focus will always be on creating housing abundance, but we also want to develop a policy agenda that kind of reflects our mission holistically. And so that means that we're meaningfully addressing the needs of low and moderate income renters, homeowners who are really bearing the cost of the housing crisis most directly. So that's where we kind of get into those other additional priorities. All right, so the YIMBY bill, the much talked about YIMBY bill. This is our signature bill. Our goal with this bill is to legalize the homes we need for people at all stages of life and at all incomes. This means young people who are looking for their first apartment, young families that are looking to buy their first home, their condo, single family home, what have you, empty nesters who, had a family but now live in a larger single family home and want to downsize and stay in their community, or really any other life situation that you could imagine. The fact of the matter is that right now we just do not have the homes for people at these different stages of life, and that's what we're trying to do with this bill. I mean, when we kind of look at the data on this, it's pretty clear. Like, young and working class people cannot afford to stay in Massachusetts, which is why you see people leaving the state. I mean, I was kind of shocked to see this stat, but the last year were more working age people, age 25 to 44, moved into Massachusetts than moved out was 2009. And I think that's really reflective of the fact that there are no starter homes available. People cannot afford to settle down here, so they're going to go to New Hampshire, they're going to go to North Carolina, and we really, we're losing a lot when people decide to leave the state. Um, and then also another piece of that, of course, is a lot of homeowners bought their home when interest rates were much lower than they are right now. And so there's not a lot of incentive to sell. And all this kind of works together to create a really tight housing market where there's not a lot of homes for rent, there's not a lot of homes to buy. And when there's a limited supply and really intense competition for those homes, then what you get are raising prices and bidding wars. And I think anybody who's tried to buy a home or maybe rent an apartment has gotten outbid by somebody who can pay way above what the asking price is. And as makes sense, the people who have the most, who are the wealthiest, are always able to outbid those who don't have as much. So our YIMBY bill here is really focused on trying to make it easier to build a variety of homes at different price points. Rep. Vargas kind of talked about the various pieces that are in the bill, but I do want to go over them in a little bit more detail here. Starting with left to right here, the first piece is legalizing apartments around public transportation statewide. So what this portion of the bill would extend MBTA style zoning districts to the rest of the state. Of course, the MBTA communities just covers eastern Massachusetts, but in Springfield, up in the Merrimack Valley, there are regional transit authorities and bus and rail and all of that. And so we should be building homes around those too. And so what our bill would do would require that areas around transit would need to create multifamily zoning districts that allow housing at a density of 15 units per acre. Sound familiar? I know, I'm sick of hearing of 15 units per acre too. And then if the development has more than 10 units, it would kind of create a requirement that any additional units, or 15% of those units, would need to be set aside for people making 80% of the area median income. So it kind of has a little inclusionary zoning piece built into that. The second piece here is allowing up to 5 homes on lots connected to water and sewer, and up to 3 homes on all other lots. I can't see you all, but I'm sure some people are kind of shaking their head like, is this possible? And I want to be like, yes, it is possible. Maine and Vermont have already done this. They did it at 2 and 4. We're going for 3 and 5, but I think it's really important to mention that, like, this is not some pie in the sky policy here. States have already done this, and this is not including states on the West Coast that have already moved on this. So believe that we can build. We've looked at those policies, see how we can work them in Massachusetts. It's set up structurally very similar to the ADU law that passed last year. So what I mean by that is that if you look through the bill, and I encourage you to all look at the language afterwards, is it defines kind of the different home types. So it defines a duplex, it defines a triplex, a townhome, a quadplex, and then it says no zoning ordinance or bylaw can prevent these types of homes based on their access to water and sewer. So that's kind of a really big piece that I'm probably really excited about for this session. Moving along the line here, kind of two pieces related to lot sizes. So the first one is eliminating minimum lot size requirements. This is really important because I was kind of surprised when I was doing the research on this, but Massachusetts actually has really large lots. The median lot size in Massachusetts is 20,000 square feet. And so if we want to cut down on that, we need to eliminate minimum lot size requirements that we see of, sometimes you see half an acre, full acre, 2 acre minimum lot sizes. And what this means is that if you take 20,000 square feet or if you take 1 acre to build each home, you're going to run out of room pretty quickly. And we're in kind of a smaller state in Massachusetts. And it just leads to sprawl, it makes us overly reliant on cars. And then as we keep kind of sprawling out, it threatens the natural forests and landscapes that kind of make Massachusetts a beautiful state. So this bill, again, would eliminate minimum lot size requirements. The second piece to that is that we amend the subdivision control law. The subdivision control law already exists in state law, and it governs how lots are split up in the state. And so what our bill would do would make a slight amendment to that process that already exists and make it easier to take a smaller lot, split it up into or take a lot, split it up into smaller lots, and then build homes on each of those lots kind of within certain size parameters. So I think that's a really exciting provision that has a lot of potential for creating infill development. Then the last major component that I want to highlight here, just kind of a fan favorite, is eliminating minimum parking requirements for new residential developments. There's books, podcasts, all the stuff about why eliminating minimum parking requirements is important. Of course, this doesn't mean that no parking will be provided. It just means that it will be better matched to the demand. We have study after study. The MAPC study comes to mind about how we overbuild parking. We have more parking than there are cars that we need for. And so what that happens is that builders have to spend more money on parking spots that they don't need, which drives up the costs of the development. And then we take up valuable land that could be used for homes and have it for a parking lot instead. So this is attempting to crack down on that. All right. And then there's, again, this is a long bill, kind of like an ominous bill. And this Rep. Vargas mentioned some of these points here, so I don't want to spend too much time on them. But I think the one I do want to highlight here is the housing production plan developed by the Housing Advisory Council. So right now, the state does not have a housing goal that it's working towards. And I think it's extraordinarily helpful to have kind of that North Star. And we can think about what is it going to take to reach that. This plan says that we need 222,000 new homes over the next 10 years. We're currently building at the rate that would mean that we would need to build about 20,000 new homes per year. We're currently building at about 11,000 new homes per year. So we need to practically double our housing production. And we think about the different tools in the toolbox here that can get us there. Having these numbers here as a frame of reference, I find is extraordinarily helpful and will be really impactful for making our case, both on Beacon Hill, but then also with talking with our neighbors and our family about why it's important that we build more housing. When it feels like, oh my God, aren't we doing enough already? And the answer is like, no, we still need to do more. Moving on to the single stair bill that is sponsored by Rep. Kilcoyne and then also Senator John Cronin. Again, the impetus for this, the reason that this is important is that right now, if you want to build a residential building above 3 stories, you need to have a second staircase. And this was originally put in because it makes sense. If one staircase is on fire, then there should be another place to exit. But there's been, research recently about single staircase buildings that exist already in New York and Seattle and other places, showing that they're actually just as safe as regular buildings. And the reason for that is since that original requirement was put into place, we've made a lot of improvements on fire safety. So sprinklers are now in buildings, or they have, pressurized staircase, fire sealants. You should read the report sponsored by the Pew Charitable Trust on all the different fire safety things that exist now. It's really fascinating. But the point being is that having kind of that second staircase is just not necessarily as needed as it was 50, 60 years ago. Another benefit of single stair buildings is that because you don't have to build a second staircase, they're cheaper to build. Uh, as you can see on the diagram right here, it makes it easier to build family size units. And that is the case because it works in conjunction with another building code law that requires that a bedroom have a window. And of course, corner apartment buildings have more windows. And so if you have a staircase going down the middle of the building, it's a lot easier to place family style apartment buildings. We know that's such a need. So many apartment buildings, it's just studios, 1 and 2 bedrooms. This would make it easier to build 3 and 4 bedrooms. Uh, and then the last piece I'll say here is that, because they're smaller buildings, they're easier to build on smaller lots. So it just opens up the possibilities of places that we can build. I kind of touched on this a little bit, but looking on the right side here, some of the goals of the bill, right? Build family-sized apartments, lower building costs. And then I actually think there's a valid case to say about improving resident safety, because if in conjunction with this change, we also partner it with requirements around sprinklers or other types of pressurized staircase, fire sealants like that, I think we could actually get to a point where we can make these buildings even safer. Last thing, I think I already said last thing, but the real last thing is that this is just a commission to study the issue. This is not directing the or the BBRS, the building code, to change their laws. Establish a commission that's made up of experts from fire safety, architects, building code people who are deeply in the weeds of this and work on this issue every day. To look at the issue, it allocates $250,000 for some modeling that might need to get done to study it, and gives them the tools and the resources to study this issue, make sure it's safe and right for Massachusetts, and then produce a model building code that then we could implement maybe in the next couple of years. I'm looking at the time here. I realize we're a little bit behind schedule. I'm going to try to move quickly here. So the last one is the ADU, our last priority bill, I should say, is our ADU trust fund bill, which Rep. Cruz spoke to. Again, this is the goal here is to make sure that working class folks are able to benefit from the ADU legalization that went into effect this year by providing some resources for them to build an ADU. There's a lot of upfront costs that might not be covered by a traditional construction loan that this could cover. And there's also maybe, especially with interest rates so high, whether we can, buy down some of those rates. There's a lot of creative ways this bill could support that. It's intentionally kind of written as broad as possible so that as we see how the private market supplies construction loans or financing for site preparation, we can best tailor this bill to where the needs are. So it's intentionally written broadly so that we can see how it plays out and go from there. Okay, so as I mentioned, we have an additional set of bills. We've broken up into 3 categories. That's building more homes, supporting renters, and investing in affordable housing. For these types of bills, we're still going to be involved with them. Some actions that we might take is we'll sign on to joint letters. If there's a hearing, we'll come and testify for the hearing. And then also as opportunities arise to raise our support for the bill, we will do so. That's kind of the level of support that we'll provide for these bills. But the first one here that the Rep. Vargas mentioned, an act to promote Yes in God's Backyard. This is also kind of a zoning reform bill, and basically what it allows religious institutions to do is to build housing on their property beyond what the zoning currently allows for, both in terms of height and in terms of density. And then it also has some requirements around affordability. The second bill here, an act allowing movable tiny homes as permanent residential dwellings and accessory dwelling units. An absolute mouthful, but it's a really important bill. And movable tiny homes are small homes, roughly, could be small 400 square feet or less that could be moved, but can also be fixated or fixed on a solid structure. So they're permanent, and right now they're not allowed by right. So this bill would allow them by right wherever single family homes are allowed, very similar to the ADU bill. The next one here, an act relative to zoning. somewhat misnamed, I think, because we're really focused on the pieces that have to do with shortening the timelines for special permits. Right now, special permit granting authority, there's kind of timelines set in state law. This would reduce those timelines so these can happen quicker. And then also what's really important, and I'm bringing out my notes here because I don't want to mess this up, is that it changes the standard uh, by which a special permit is granted. So it lowers the standard to make it a little bit easier for that special permit granting authority to grant that. And the change that is made is from a substantial hardship to a practical difficulty. And again, this is a really wonky thing, so I hope was clear with myself there. But it effectively makes it easier for a permit granting authority to issue a variance on a project. The next two sections here, supporting renters and investing in affordable housing. We have three bills here focused on supporting renters. The first one is an act promoting access to council and housing stability in Massachusetts. This would establish a program that would offer free legal aid and representation to low-income individuals facing eviction or other legal matters. An act to guarantee a tenant's first right to refusal. This is a piece of enabling legislation that would allow tenants to match a third-party offer when their homes are being sold. So what this means is that if you're a tenant and you live in a building and the building owner wants to sell it, it would give you the opportunity to work with your fellow tenants, maybe designate rights to an affordable housing developer to make an offer on that property and keep it permanently affordable. So it's a kind of a stability-focused measure. And then the last one here is an act eliminating forced brokers fees. Right now, Greater Boston is one of the few places where tenants or prospective tenants might be forced to pay a broker's fee for a broker that they didn't hire. And this can be, a few $1,000s, and it's just another barrier that makes it difficult to rent. So it's an important bill that would make it easier to find a new apartment. Then the last thing here, investing in affordable housing. The Enact Advancing Massachusetts Social Housing Program. This would allocate a decent amount of money or $100 million to be exact. That's more than a decent amount of money to a revolving loan fund that would support mixed income social housing. And then the last one here is an act relative to affordable housing and environmental adaptation dollars. What this would do is it would raise the fee that's part of the deed's excise tax when a property is sold, and then direct that additional revenue raised into affordable housing and environmental adaptation funds. Okay, time check. I know 6:48. I'm trying to go fast here. Maybe folks want to stick around a little bit past 7, then we can answer some more questions because I know they're coming in. I appreciate my colleagues who might be answering questions on the side here. So when we think about, we have this gigantic policy agenda. Like, how are we going to get it passed? And this is how we're going to do that. I think this is how we're thinking about it. So we have some like operating assumptions, and these are kind of subject to change, but we're kind of thinking that this session will follow last year's timeline in the sense that bills will get a hearing in the summer. They'll probably stay in committee for most of the session, and then there might be a little bit of a summer scramble, as I'm calling it, where we spend the last couple of months trying to figure out what actually gets past the finish line. So this has some implications for when we're doing our advocacy, when it would be most effective. The second assumption is that, also similar to last session, the governor will propose a major housing bill that will be the primary vehicle that a lot of these policies hopefully get included on. I want to plug here that there was an Unlocking Housing Production Commission that the governor appointed that our executive director served on that has a lot of great recommendations that we expect to, or that we hope, I should say, will be in that bill. I encourage you all to look at that after this meeting. And then, of course, we're expecting that zoning reform faces an uphill battle. For lack of a better word or way of describing it, the MBTA Communities Act has become pretty toxic on Beacon Hill. And I think there's a large perception that any further action on zoning reform will be met with fierce resistance from constituents. And so we know we're going into that, and we need to approach our messaging and our advocacy, recognizing that a lot of legislators are going to be skittish around going further on zoning. Okay, so our strategy kind of can be broken down into 3 separate buckets here, which is organize, educate, and advocate. I will say, caveat, of course, educate and advocate. There's definitely some overlap there. I mean, just on the second bullet points there, you can see bill hearings are the same thing. But in terms of organizing, it's base building. It's kind of what we're doing right now. We're trying to bring together our members, get them oriented around the policy agenda that we're pushing this year. Just last Friday, we organized our affiliate groups in a meeting, and we're going to set up kind of regular meetings to figure out how we can plug our affiliate groups into our statewide agenda more thoughtfully. If you live in a city or town that we have an affiliate group in, I encourage you to go look at our website and see if that is the case and reach out to join one. But if not, if you don't live in a community with an affiliate group, feel free. We'll share my information afterwards to email me, and we can think about how we can plug you into our statewide advocacy efforts. On the educate side, we're going to be doing some lunch and learns, or we're planning some lunch and learns with legislators. These are kind of in addition to our bill hearings in a more casual format where we can talk about the specifics of our bills with legislators. This is inside the building. First 3 here are kind of more Beacon Hill focused things. There's our bill hearing where we're going to be talking about all these bills in a public setting, and then we're continuing to set up individual meetings with legislators with a particular focus right now on those in the Housing Committee. And then I want to plug this member events here because I think as the session goes on, we want to do continual education and make sure that our members are up to date on all this. And that with the idea that if you all are better educated on our bills, then you'll be able to talk with your legislators more confidently and talk with your friends and neighbors about this stuff more confidently. And then the last piece here has to do with advocacy. And this is, think of our lobby day last year. We're probably not going to do a lobby day this year, but thinking of next year and trying to time it up well with when we think it could be the most effective. So that's bringing out our base, showing the Massachusetts State House that there is a pro-housing majority in the state, that people want housing. You can do that through a show of force at a lobby day, also at our bill hearings. And then we have an active letter writing campaign right now, as Representative Cruz alluded to a little bit, where we're sending letters to legislators asking them to co-sponsor our priority bills. And I'm gonna stop there. That is kind of the end of the presentation. That is a summary of our policy agenda, how we're thinking about getting it passed. And now I'll stop sharing my screen so we can go to a Q&A. And if possible, Elvira, my colleague who's on the webinar here, if there are some questions that came through, that could answer, I'd be happy to do that. I'll also take a look at the chat right now.
You want me to read out the question from the chat? I could do that. Is that?
Yeah, that would be helpful.
So one that's still open that we have is from Jerson, I think. Hello, for the homeowners that have merger lots, when can we predict the Bill H1572 to be useful for homeowner? I currently have 3 merger lots that I am looking to subdivide into 2 lots to build single family units for my family.
Yeah, great question. Really appreciate the question. I think at the pace that the legislature works at, I think probably best case scenario, if this gets passed, it would be in 2026. And then after that, there would probably be a regulatory process similar to ADUs where we flesh it out. So unfortunately, I think it might be a year or 2 before it would be actionable. But honestly, I would love to connect with you and kind of hear about the current process for subdividing lots and think about how we could maybe use that testimony and think about why it's important in a bill hearing or in another story sharing format.
Awesome. Another question we have from Michael Ardito. Sorry if I'm mispronouncing your name. Studies have been cited about the potential impact of the laws passed in the last session. Is there a plan to follow up on these studies and attempt to measure the actual impact on housing production? Knowing what changes have the largest impact can prioritize future legislation as well as provide evidence for other states that are trying to pass similar laws but face heavy skepticism, excuse me.
Yes. Absolutely. I mean, we're extremely invested in particularly like the ADU portion and that being effective and actually leading to homes built. And I want to pull back, right? Like we're not changing zoning laws because it's fun to change zoning laws. We want to change zoning laws that actually lead to more homes being built. And so when we look at the ADU law, particularly as kind of one of the first forays of the state in getting into local zoning, like if that is viewed as a success, then it makes all of our future advocacy even more impactful. So we're definitely working closely with like HLC and some of our other partners to see how uptick is on ADUs, whether people are interested in buying them. We're also kind of thinking about internally whether we might want to direct some of our resources to doing some research on that to see where ADUs are being built, where they are not being built, what are some of the barriers there, and being very vigilant on that so that we can nip any potential problem areas in the bud. But I think that your question is, raises a very good point about, we can't just, oh, we passed ADUs, oh, we're on to the next thing. Like, no, implementation is just important as getting the law passed, and we're going to be monitoring it very closely.
Awesome. Other question we have here. Why the study on single stair apartments instead of legalizing single stair?
Yeah. That's a good question. And there is, a little bit of a political calculation there, and also just like in the reality. I mean, so there is a process already for changing the building code. The process where you could submit a proposed amendment through the BBRS, the Board of Building Regulations and Standards. That's kind of the main way that it gets changed. So if we were to write a bill that automatically changed it, think that would make us a lot of enemies with the people who we need in support of that bill to get it passed. And I think it's just kind of getting a little bit ahead of ourselves there. And that, like, yes, I believe and we believe that single stair buildings are safe and will be really beneficial for the Commonwealth. But before we do that, like, I think it's worthwhile to take some time, dedicate a study, really prove that, build on some of the available evidence that is already there, and then we can make an extraordinarily compelling case to the BBRS about why this is a good idea, or why we think this is a good idea.
Awesome. All right, next one from Chris Vaughn. 3 questions.
Oh,
So
Chris, cheating, man, cheating.
I'll read them one at a time. So the first question is, when would be the right time to contact our state reps to encourage them to support these bills? That's the first one.
Yeah, first one, I mean, right now, so we have an open letter writing campaign. If you go to our website, if you go to the news section, there is a letter writing campaign where you can fill out a form letter, although I think you can edit it a little bit, where you ask, or it automatically sends an email to your state rep and state senator asking them to support the bill. So I think like right now, making those asks, getting co-sponsors early on is key because when committees have sometimes hundreds of bills that they need to look at, and I think it's very compelling if one bill has, 40 co-sponsors on it compared to, let's say, 2. So really important to do that now.
Awesome. Second question from Chris is, what is the most effective way to reach out to them?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yes. And yeah, so most effective way to reach out, I think emails and calls are good. Like getting to the state house can be a lot. Like I don't expect that. State reps and state senators have district offices. Some of them often host, coffee hours or stuff like that. I find that state reps and state senators, like they're very accessible. You They're very accessible, and if you want to find a way to reach out to them, can send them an email, send their staff an email. Uh, and you can, I think, fairly easily get a meeting or at the very least pass along a message.
And then the last one from Chris, what else can we do apart from contacting our reps to advocate for these?
Talking to your friends and neighbors. That's really what it is. I mean, like there's a few ways that we're going to get this passed, but at the end of the day, we need to build a broad base of support. This cannot be viewed as like a niche little thing that people are really focused on support. We need to demonstrate that there is broad support for these bills across the Commonwealth. And so each conversation you have with a friend, each conversation you have with a neighbor, a coworker, just further spreads the message, further builds support, and that's how we create a movement.
Awesome. Last one for you, Mike, and then there's one for Jesse in here. So for you, Mike, it's and then actually three more for you, Mike. Sorry. All right. After the release of so this was from Aiden. After the release of Abundance by Ezra Klein and other current events, is there some sense of urgency to actually do something from our legislator?
Yes, yes, the abundance thing is good. I think honestly it does more for creating urgency and excitement around like kind of people in our base. I think that the legislature is feeling the urgency, particularly around like the changes in Washington and what that could mean for the state. We also, I mean, so last session for variety of reasons, I don't think went as well as both us as advocates, as residents of the state, and also as legislators went. So we're kind of closely monitoring some rule changes there that would make it easier to pass some of these pieces of legislation more quickly. So I would say that with the like kind of weighted and biased for Massachusetts, which does have a slower moving legislative process, that there is a sense of urgency to work on this. And I would also say like the governor has made this a priority of hers, this being housing. And, I think that her support, her bully pulpit can go a long way in setting the conversation on Beacon Hill.
Awesome. All right. The two questions that had come on the side chat were, one, how are detached ADUs being treated? Movable houses are detached ADUs.
So if it's a movable tiny home, then right now I don't believe it does not count as like an ADU, and that's one of our additional policy priorities is to change the law so that movable tiny home would basically functionally be counted as an ADU, and it'd be easier to like kind of live in those homes, and it would be brought online, and this is kind of a small tweak, but a really impactful tweak for bringing naturally occurring affordable housing, making it easier to build and to live in.
Awesome. Oh, oh, so sorry. That was it. All right.
Good. That's
Oh, okay. Well, there's one for Jesse here. There's a couple too that came through the thing. So we'll get to that in a second. But for Jesse, James asked, it's a little sad to hear how toxic MBTA CA has become, especially because how misinformation surrounding it when it's 55% support. What should we emphasize most to the legislature's neighbors about these new bills or about how these new bills are different? There it is.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know that I would necessarily say toxic per se. I think it's more controversial. I think some of the pushback that we've seen, either from towns not passing MBTA community zoning that they're required to pass, or the referenda to overturn them, or certainly the state auditor's recent, I think, misdetermination of MBTA communities as a local unfunded mandate, has, given pause to legislators. Although I think our message has continued to be publicly, it is an important law. It's a meaningful law. The vast majority of communities are in compliance with the law. And we actually, just to give a little teaser out there, we're doing some polling and pulling the MBTA communities like expansion that Mike talked about in the YIMBY bill, and actually polls quite popularly, as does the MBTA Communities Act, with a majority support for it. So I don't know that it's, we're not at risk, I believe, of the legislature overturning MBTA communities. In fact, they know it's their law and that they want to protect it, and hopefully they can work to strengthen it as needed. But I do think the unfunded local mandate determination by the auditor will be sorted out in the courts and be dealt with sufficiently. I think to your question, James, about how do we frame this differently, a lot of the approach to the MBTA Communities Act was to really lean into local control and local decision making, which is really part and parcel to our local legislative process throughout Massachusetts, right, with the town meeting form of government. And so that's why that law was crafted, to, yes, be a mandate to communities, but also give a lot of leeway to communities in terms of how do they implement it. I think that was an experiment of sorts, and we're finding that way of doing it has hit some roadblocks and some challenges. And I think there's an opportunity for us to say we have a housing shortage, an extreme housing shortage that is making housing unaffordable for people across the income spectrum. We need to do more, and we need to do it in a way that doesn't get caught up in some of these local processes. And I think we will have data that demonstrates that building the homes people across the Commonwealth can afford is more popular than retaining local control. It is more popular than protecting neighborhood character. And I think that's the conversation that we need to lean into, despite the loud vocal minority of communities and residents who are fighting tooth and nail against MBTA communities. That and other forms of zoning reform to build more homes is popular, and that's the case that we'll need to make. So I hope that answers your question.
Awesome. Thanks, Jesse. There's a couple more in the chat. Either Mike or Jesse, you could answer. It didn't specify. So this one is from Groom. At least that's what's listed here. Great job on your legislative leaders and on my team. We are fighting the daily fight in Milton, where I live, actively pushing back on misinformation around the MBTA Communities Act. Broad support is likely. Oh, this is more of a comment. Broad support is exactly what we need. I'm excited to get more involved to spread these initiatives in our community beyond. Great work, team. Yay. Jacinda has a question. Can you expand on the rule changes you're advocating for?
Yes, so we're not advocating for the rules necessarily. So the legislature basically at the beginning of session can set rules on how they're going to do business this year. And there have been some proposed changes that would both add a little bit more transparency to the process, and one that would speed up or set kind of timelines on reporting bills out of committee. So last session, I mean, we had a hearing on our bill, and it basically sat in committee for the rest of the session. And a proposed rule, again, this is not final, was put like a time frame of, I believe, 60 days after a hearing in which a bill in a committee must be acted on. So we're just watching that to see, that might change the cadence a little bit in terms of like our advocacy if bills are moving out of committee sooner than we thought. And then there's another proposed rule about potentially making committee votes public. We'll see about that. So yeah, I think we're just more kind of keeping an eye on it rather than specifically advocating for or against certain rules.
Awesome. That's it. Thank you, guys.
All right. Well, it's amazing. I'm looking at the attendees here and the people, and I thank you so much for hanging on, for taking up some of your Thursday night to be with us and to engage with Abundant Housing Massachusetts. I mean, we are building the pro housing movement here. We know that we're treating this issue with the urgency that it needs. I'm really, so appreciative and thankful to work for this organization that is kind of at the forefront of change here. And I'm so thankful and appreciative to all of you who volunteer your time, your energy, your smarts, your resources, all of this to move these issues forward, because housing affordability affects all of us. And I think that we have an opportunity here to really make a difference, not only in the short term, but also for the next generations of Massachusetts residents. So thank you so much. Sorry if we didn't get to your question. My information is in the chat. Please reach out to me. I do check my email every day compulsively. So reach out. I'll be happy to answer those questions, and have a great night.